Maybe can also do reset. Take some time. Dr. Martin. I'll follow up with electronic copy. I'm not going to go back. I'm not going to go
It depends on a lot of the guest guitar. Yeah.
Yes, they're saying, I think afterwards. Definitely, I could see that. I'm just
All right, good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. All right. So we are going to go ahead and call the meeting to order. It's about 1 o'clock, and as usual, we're going to begin with the roll call.
So I think my list is updated. We're still working on the website, but it's almost there. So if you are a senator and I don't call you, then let me know. Shoot me an email would be great, and then I can make sure we get everything updated. All right. Alan? Banford? Boyd?
Here.
Brock?
Here.
Buzan?
Here.
Paramanica?
Here.
Chang?
Here.
Colley?
Here.
Council?
Here.
Cuomo?
Here.
Doms?
Here.
Davis? Dutch?
Here.
Dyer?
Here.
Elias? Ellison?
Here.
Khan?
Here.
Green?
Here.
Griffin?
Here.
Hadley?
Here.
Hampton? Hart? Hildebrand?
Here.
Danson?
Here.
Yara Pasmino? Kazim?
Here.
Leeds?
Here.
Maggiano?
Here.
Matthews?
Present.
Mendes? Moon? Morales?
Here.
Afoe?
Here.
Peralta? Perry? Riker?
Here also.
Roberts?
Here.
Ruffin?
Here.
Song?
Here.
Talbot?
Here.
Shepherd?
Here.
Shin?
Here.
Vignano?
Here.
Swift?
Here.
Talbot? Wait, that's good. Couple times. There we go. Viswanath? Waters? Wentz? Yang? Great. And Yarborough.
Here.
All right.
Thank you. So as usual, the minutes were approved electronically. So at this time, I want to hand the floor over to our administrators for administrative reports, but I do want to note that if they open the floor for questions, that our agenda item under new business that focuses on the provost leadership is going to be held until then. So we will, any topics that relate to that, we can wait until that time. But if you would like to, you're welcome. Sure.
Good afternoon. I just wanted to, there was a question on Veterans Day. It came from a couple of people. Yeah. I just wanted to respond to that first and then get to the big picture remarks that I had. So this is what we have. So one is that UCM, which is our communications, they'll be posting on the institutional social media channels, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, a tribute to current students who are veterans, and also generally expressing their gratitude to all veterans in our community. That's one. Two, at the Richards College of Business, there's an event on a Veterans Day tribute event. All veterans are welcome to join for a light breakfast and program honoring their service. And Student Affairs is partnering with the Ingram Library to host a reception and open house for a collection on the library showcasing materials from military campaigns and veterans papers in the special collections. And there's a reception and some other events going on. So just wanted to respond to the question from the last meeting on things that were going on. This one. All right, so let me talk about some general things. I know there's lots of interest in and about the provost, and we'll have the discussion later. But I did, just want to say that, we are all here to support the faculty, support the institution. And so when these concerns were raised, we were, both John and I were open to having this discussion and talked to Dylan, got a sense of the concerns. He's gathered more concerns, it seems, kind of in terms from a survey and stuff. And John himself has been open to, honestly, I wasn't sure if he wants to make it a general conversation, but he himself wanted to be like, I can briefly talk about it. So I really respect John being willing to come in front of you and have some remarks at some broad level. Personally, for me, though, I'll tell you my main interest is simply in what we can do better as a team. It's, how do we move forward? There are things, that's what I want to hear, which is what can we do? What are the things we can do to move forward in a positive way and make things better? It's always, we can debate everything that happened in the last few years and look at every incident and so in every event and try to revisit. But my interest is definitely more forward-looking to see what I can do during my short time here, and then give that feedback to the next permanent president. That's where I am. So that's about kind of him, and we'll talk a bit more on that later. Broadly, what I've been, focused on, I remain focused on what I told you in my very first meeting, which is undergraduate education. And that was my opening letter on, I am concerned about our retention graduation rates. They've gotten a bit better the last couple of years. But at the same time, we still have our graduation rates today still lag what they were in 2018 or around that time. We're lower than where we were back then. As a big picture thing of the who we are as an institution, this is the University of West Georgia is as a comprehensive institution. The purpose is to be an undergraduate focused institution with some graduate education, right? So it's primarily undergraduate with some graduate. In terms of that mission, there has been a major shift. To give you some numbers, 2018 to today, and I'm saying 2018 because that was the last time we had an enrollment record, and now this is the year we surpassed that. So we were a bit below 14,000 in 2018. We were 13,700 or something. And today we are 14,300, around that number. So a bit lower than 14,000 6 years ago, a bit higher than 14,000 today. But the composition is very different. Our graduate programs, the number of graduate students has doubled during this time. If you look at our undergraduate students, if we had 100 students in 2018, today we have 82 students. And if you look at undergraduate students on campus, if we had 100 students in 2018, today we have 50. So our graduate education, almost all of it online, has doubled. Our undergraduate education on campus has halved. And that to me is a huge concern for the sustainability of this institution. One, in terms of what our purpose is. Two, in terms of these are the students who use our housing and dining and who, Greek life, they form the culture of this place, and then they leave, and then 10, 20 years later, they come back, and then they support us. All our current, I've been meeting a lot of our donors. All our current big donors are people who did their undergraduate education here, and who, many of them, were in Greek life, or or in sports, or has some other connection. And we're fine now. I mean, again, thanks to, we love our graduate students because they come in, we get our, it's great for our budgets, right? Because if we didn't have those, we would be in real trouble. So we are thankful to the graduate students we have. We're also thankful to the online students we have. So the undergraduate online is about 25%. And I think in this year's class, it was even more, 35% or something like that. Again, we're thankful to anyone who wants to get educated from the University of West Georgia, because we have to serve them, because if you don't serve them, someone else will. We don't want to lose these students. Georgia, by the way, even in the online space, Georgia is a net exporter. So we are losing students to others. So we don't want to lose students. We want to make sure we serve our students well, whether online space, graduate space, any space. However, who are the students we really need to bring in for long-term sustainability? Undergraduates on campus. And because if you look at any of our numbers, any of the areas in which we're struggling on the budget side, you look at housing, we are about 65% or so occupancy. You look at our dining and bookstore use and showing up on games and everything else. So I've been doing, with my team, a deep dive on overall numbers, how many students do we have on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and so on. It is a problem because we don't have, if you don't have people here people think Thursday and it's over and they're gone. They're not here on Friday. They're not here on the weekends for our games and other things. They're losing out on all of that connection. Some of it honestly is also because at least in some departments, faculty members are less willing to teach in-person classes, but we need that. If we want to create a sustainable model, we need to have faculty members who are willing to teach in person and do a good job in person, because honestly, at the end of the day, the online education is happening. It's getting better every year. It's getting more and more, technology is getting better and better, which means that education will keep getting better. But that education is also easily replicable. If there are online classes, Google can start teaching those online classes today with their open access textbooks and so on. Actually, I've been working from the system office, I've been working on a project in nursing where Google is helping us build like a tutoring model for anatomy and physiology. And within a couple of months, they have this amazing product using open access textbooks. It's like a YouTube channel in which you can decide what level of feedback you want, how much you want someone's help. It creates these awesome podcasts within 30 seconds on any topic. I could be driving and say, hey, I need a podcast on neurons, and it'll be it sounds like a real podcast that you may get on any of our top channels, right? So it does things like those. And so anything we do in the online space is easily replicable. What is not replicable by anyone else, either by our competitors in higher ed or by technology firms, is our in-person teaching and then our experiential education more broadly. And we do a good job on all of this, right? So in person, we are doing a good job, both in class and outside the class. We have, student-led groups. And some of it was in my letter that I sent out earlier. We have great student-led groups, whether it's the business school or communication and film. We have great labs. We're getting great equipment from our grants. So we are offering some really wonderful experiences, but we have very few students who are taking advantage of those on-campus experiences. And that population has been shrinking. And it has actually gotten a bit better since last year, but it's still, like I said, about half of where we were. And that cannot be sustainable for us. So just wanted to put that out there so that you can think about what your units, your departments can do to help us there, because we need those students. And then we need to make sure we retain them and we help them graduate, right? So it's right the entire chain. I mean, as one example, I'll tell you, I've asked my admissions folks to see how we can recruit students who will truly value what we have to offer. Because I want students who come here and a greater proportion of them actually want to be here on campus. So how do we get those kinds of students? How do we work on every single thing that we do for retaining them so that we have better graduation rates? We cannot be a D1 school and a graduation rate of like 43% or something as we have right now. So it has to be better, and we have to keep, and those are the areas in which, that's what my focus has been from day one. It'll continue to be my focus moving forward while I'm here. I don't know how long I'll be here, but it seems like a few more months because the search committee has been announced, but as you know, these things take time. So I do anticipate being here for a few more months. But I can tell you, even when I go back to the system office, that will remain my priority. I mean, I may leave West Georgia, but I'm still the chief academic officer of the system. And that will be something which will be top of mind from there as well for West Georgia. The new president may have, different priorities, but I'm pretty sure this would be one of those as well, because it is just something very critical. It's just staring us in the face, and if you don't work on it now, it's going to have lots of impacts for, like I said, our auxiliaries, dining, all of this, our sustainability of D1 athletics, which all revolves around undergraduates, our future fundraising, which is primarily the undergraduate. So it's going to have huge impact for the institution. Again, there's nothing right now, we're fine. We're okay with right now with the revenues coming in from our grad students and everything else. But I'm just saying that is a priority for me, and I'm pretty sure will be a priority for moving forward for the institution. Let me stop right here and see if there are any questions or comments. Yes,
Dr. Morgan, thank you very much for that. With respect to the search committee that's going on, I'm chair of the rules committee, which is a subcommittee of the Faculty Senate, and now I've lost it and vaguely blind as well. But under the executive committee of the Faculty Senate, one of the functions of list and policy and procedures, one of the functions is for Part C is interviewing candidates for university-wide positions and provide evaluations to the appropriate search committees. And I wonder just a couple of things. What would qualify as a university-wide position? And could we, if that's going to stay in the policies and procedures, could we seek to implement that again, please? For not just clearly the president is a university-wide position, but can we define what that is and then get that ball rolling again if we want to keep that in there, sir?
That's in your Faculty Senate.
Executive committee, yes.
Okay, I mean, so first of all, I mean, as you all know, I mean, we can have policies and procedures at the institution level, but we have one board and we have one board of regents policy, right? So
I don't know whether it's policy and procedures, Dr. Moore, for the whole university. I don't know.
no, I mean, it doesn't matter.
Okay,
I'm saying if it's anything at the institution level, it is superseded by a board of regents policy. And there's a board of regents policy which was formed a year and a half ago on how presidents are selected. And it has specific guidelines on what the search committee is like. And those are the guidelines that they have used. By the way, I'm just saying general stuff. I've had no influence on the search committee or in the process, and I will stay away from anything that happened with that. So everything I'm saying about the search is just more general things. So I'm just saying that we have a board policy on how to select, at least for presidents, how to select, and the search committee meets those criteria. Now, in terms of overall feedback for the faculty or for anyone else, and we have Dylan is on the search committee, and I'm sure if we see the way it happens at other institutions, I'm sure there'll be opportunities for anyone to give feedback. But that's what the process is for presidents. Now, if your question is for other positions, kind of, how the faculty senate is engaged. And I'm sure it's, you know, I don't know what the tradition here has been in terms of engaging others for, you know, when other positions are hired. So I'll have to look at kind of how it's been in the past. But at the end of the day, I think we have to accept that any institution, it is, you know, it is the person who's supervising the individual, right? So I mean, for example, right now, today we had things on the provost, right? So I'm happy to hear, but you're giving me input, and that's it, and then it's between me and him. You know what I'm saying? It's like, so for any position, that's how it works. But we should definitely have ways to take input, not just from the faculty senate, but for any institutional body. Including our staff council and others. I mean, I'll tell you, for example, one thing which the staff have expressed it, because we don't have a staff member on the committee. I mean, at least from the faculty side, we have a faculty member on the committee. So everyone should have an avenue to provide input on important decisions.
Sorry, President. So, but with respect to that policy, you know, it says it's clearly there that the faculty senate. And by the way, I don't mean interview with respect to yay or nay, interview for the punches and the feedback to people who will be making the decision, of course. But is that policy? What is a university-wide policy? Because I know it hasn't happened. This is nobody's fault. It hasn't happened. I've been on exec for 3 years and that hadn't been happening. So I wondered if it was going to stay there, if we could define what a university-wide position is, and then to work out how we were going to implement this policy.
I think that'll have to be, you know, there's things in the faculty senate. I don't know if John, there's something you want to add here, but there's a difference between the faculty senate and the administration, right? I mean, so how the faculty senate governs itself, or what you think is important, that is, you know, that's up to the senate. So I'm not sure. I don't know. John, if there's something you want to add.
I think the question is around, based on this policy, what input does this group have for the process?
That's it.
And I think we need to wait for the charge meeting happens next week, I believe.
Yeah.
And then after that, I think it's appropriate for the university to ask, based on this desire from faculty senate encoded in the handbook, how can this be implemented throughout the process? But as Shwani's point is made, we're guided by USG process, and I think we can ask and look for that to occur. We can't mandate to the chancellor's position.
Oh, I wasn't suggesting that for a minute.
Understood.
I wasn't suggesting that for a minute. I mean,
Understood.
we don't mandate to anybody, but just a university-wide position that put the precedent to one side, of course. Just that would be, if we're gonna have a policy in there, if we're not, we could remove it. It's,
I mean, we can clarify that up at a later time.
okay, all right, that's fine, thank you.
Any other thoughts, questions on the search committee, on anything else that I mentioned? Yes.
With regards to not having enough on-campus students still, are other system institutions still dealing with this post-COVID, or is it mainly a West Georgia problem?
So all have, but the situation at West Georgia is more dire than our peers. I mean, there are a couple of institutions where online education is much higher than here, but honestly, they are small institutions like an Atlanta Met or in East Georgia, not large institutions. So here there was a bigger flip to the online thing, which kind of has, you know, in some areas it has gotten a bit better, but we need a lot more. And like I said, it has to be, it's a mix of many things. It's how we keep our dining halls open. It's how we do our housing. Like, I mean, I just made a big investment on the HVAC systems of our housing because we're getting some complaints. And it's also faculty being here for in-person classes, right? I mean, it's also having a push within departments, convincing students that you'll have a better experience if you're here. I keep hearing about students, and I've met, not just hearing, I've like personally met so many students who started here, are like in their second year and like, I don't have a single class that I took in person and I'm living here. And to me, that is unacceptable if we cannot offer enough in-person classes for those who want to take in-person classes. Yes, there'll always be a market for, again, I don't want to, like I said earlier, whether it's graduate education, whether it's remote, online learning, we have to serve the students we have. But there's a difference between serving those who come to us versus who do we reach out to? Who do we want? Who is truly our best market? Who will come here, who will gain from our experience, from our experiential education, who will gain from in-person teaching. But that can't just be by admissions, bringing students in of that type. If they come here and they're like, I'm living in the dorm, but I haven't taken a single class. And to me, that's an issue that has to be resolved.
Yes, I wanted to thank you really for stating it that clearly, because I feel like we haven't gotten that clear of a vision before, that graduate student enrollment doesn't really replace undergraduate enrollment in an equal measure. In fact, that undergraduate enrollment is a priority. I really think that's a very important emphasis you're putting there. In fact, it goes against what we've experienced recently, where graduate programming has been pushed in some areas, like for example, in our neck of the woods, English education at the expense of our BA certification program, where in fact we've been told explicitly many times we should just discontinue that undergraduate certification program in teaching. And so I really, really appreciate what you're saying here, that in some measures it's actually really important course correction. So thank you.
Thank you for your time. I wondered if you have any kind of committee or initiative to look at perhaps rules and regulations that have been created for the good of a particular division, whether that's academic or university-wide, that also have negative environment implications. One example that I can think of is we recently had in the last couple of years a push to consistent university level marketing that doesn't allow individual programs and divisions to market and use their own social media. That has historically worked to keep enrollments up, and since we have lost the ability to market in the way only a discipline expert would know how to market those particular areas, has resulted in undergraduate enrollment decline. And so while my question really is, while it might be good for this, it also has negative implications for enrollment. And I wonder if we have a barriers committee or anything like that to look at maybe rules that have been put in place that are negatively impact those specific population recruitments that you've talked about.
I mean, so I think that's a good perspective. And I think there should be more coordination between UCM and departments and so on this one. At the same time, I would say that marketing for programs has become so professional, so technical. Like, we have a firm that helps us in the marketing and so on. It's that you really need high level expertise in that area. That this is not about a department knowing, a chemistry department may know that, okay, these are the kind of people who are interested in chemists, in becoming chemistry majors. But how then the whole marketing operation works has become very, very sophisticated. And honestly, even at the institution level, in my view, it's not sophisticated enough. We have to be like even more at that level. So I would not be in favor of like every department does its own thing. Because you can't. It's a very competitive marketplace, especially on the undergraduate education. And if we have every department do its own thing, if anything, as a marketing professor, I'm big on having it's simple things, even simple things like the colors, the fonts, and everything else you do. Because if you're trying to build a brand for who we are, I think that consistency is important. At the same time, I'm all for if you feel that your department or whatever your views on who we're targeting, who our population is, and so on, like, hey, you're going to the wrong people. This is who our students are. That we should definitely take from you, and I'll talk to my communications team to make sure that that happens more. I was assuming it's happening already, but if it's not happening sufficiently, to me, it's kind of so that you can give us the content knowledge, and we can use the marketing machine to then push out that message
Yeah,
in a standard way.
it is a matter of absolutely getting people wanting communication from the divisions. But unfortunately, the reality, as you know, is it's always about time. And if you get your materials the day before the event, not recruiting for your event, because that's also then a staffing issue. Because if you request something 6 weeks ahead of time and you don't get it the day before,
Okay.
then it becomes, that's
So
a
we-
barrier that.
Okay,
I
so we
understand.
can, yeah, no, I know what you're saying, and we can, what you're saying is it's not just feedback, it's also the timeliness of the feedback. And we can definitely make sure that we, that feedback is taken in time and that we can have a, integrated plan so that it also doesn't become, which is another issue where if everyone does their own marketing, because then you're like competing against each other. You're wasting marketing resources because everyone is shooting for their own students. But I would definitely have a conversation with our communication folks to make sure that they take that feedback and our admissions folks to take that feedback and also take it in a timely way. Thank you.
Maybe just one more question and then we need to move on.
Okay, all right, let's go. I think there were,
There's somebody behind me.
there were two hands, but let's quickly take both questions and.
The composition said from undergrad to graduate. The first meeting you shared the graduation rate, so just for clarity, was that the graduation rate including both undergrad and graduate or just?
No, that's only undergraduate 6-year graduation rate. Yeah, the graduation rate for graduates is very high. So it's only undergraduate 6-year rate, which I was referring to. And what was the second question?
I just wondered if there's any updates on the search for a dean for the nursing.
I know we're getting close, but I don't think we can say anything else at this point.
We should have information about that next week. But thank you to the team and the committee, as well as everyone who engaged in that process. It was very successful.
Thank you, and you want to add?
Sure. Good afternoon, everybody. Happy November. It's starting to feel cooler, right? I know we've got a large agenda, great work on UPC and GPC. I'm excited to see program changes and updates in ILC and Ed and a couple of other areas. So that's always exciting. Appreciate the work that UPC and GPC do and the faculty in reviewing those. I think the consent agenda is working really well. And if we need to dive into any of those, happy to do that. Just want to talk about some of the great programs that we've had since we met last time in Faculty Senate, the Ghostly Gatherings that Chas put on. Great work there, very thematic and very timely. Looking ahead, we're in Roy Richards Hall here. And Richards College of Business is doing an ongoing Wolf Den pitch. So as part of the entrepreneurship focus, I'm really excited that the Stone Center for Entrepreneurship Family Business there is not just for business students, but really for all students. Entrepreneurship, I was talking with someone earlier today, and entrepreneurship is not owned in a single college. It happens and flourishes across the institution. So I encourage you to come out to that and to others. We are finishing this week, Ethics Week, that the USG has been emphasizing. Shout out to that. But in the same way, entrepreneurship is not owned in a particular area. Ethics is not off to one side. And I hope that you've been able to engage with some of the webinars and the content that the USG has put on. That ethics training, and I know HR has put out the training that we all go through every year. Please make sure that you're doing that. I'm stealing some of Terry's thunder there, but it is for all of us. And it's important that that we live out our mission for ethical service every single day. I've seen, been in the USG for long enough to have seen when that training was less than it is today. And I'm glad to see that it is much stronger And it's not something you just put on in the background and ignore. There's actually really good content there. So I encourage you to dive into that. We've got some great movement in grants, and ORSP's work there is really stepping up. So for those faculty, we've got an MRI grant that's going in next week, I believe, based on that timing, and some good successes there. So I encourage you to reach out to Brian and his team. They do grant finding. So if you've got a particular area of expertise or an area that you believe is fundable, then they can do the work of certainly finding matching grants for that. And we're getting more and more successful in that. And the grants that are being put in are really quite strong. So I'm confident that not only will we hit our targets this year, but exceed them. Also had some great events in humanities ribbon cutting and CMCS with donors, and we've got some renovation plans for Bonner Lecture Hall as well as the TLC. I believe that is scheduled for summer of next year. So there'll be some slight disruption, but hopefully back online for a good fall launch. And we'll share those renderings if you haven't seen them. They're pretty impressive. Along those lines, I'd like to also give an update on the Pafford renovation. We have been coordinating with the USG on some value engineering there to meet their expectations, also connecting to the central energy plant and chillers there. Pafford is expected to come offline May 25th. Sorry, May of 25. Right. I don't know that we know the day, right? But this is May of next year. So for those folks that are in Pafford and you thought you would need to start packing, apologies for the change, but this actually gives us more time to plan out and be strategic around where are people landing rather than just working with facilities and finding some current empty spaces. We'd like to have that contiguous if possible. So departments that are in Pafford now can be moved to a contiguous space and really maintain that collaboration. So that will happen across the spring semester, and we'll have a plan. Facilities will assist in moving out. That renovation of Pafford is scheduled to open in July of 26, or we concluded July of 26, so that we've got time to move people back in for fall of 26. I know that that's a ways off and will be disruptive, but it's also an enhancement of our facilities. And as Ashwani has said many times, we have a lot of improvements that need to be made across campus, and we're knocking those out across time and just beautifying and improving the space that people work in and students study in. To echo the president's comments about undergraduate, we are working across the next month. Spring schedule is out and students are registering. That's on track and looking really well. For our fall enrollment, I think the graduate was up over 20% and undergraduate about 6.7. That tracks slightly higher than our comprehensive peers across the USG, which bodes well. So that undergraduate growth is really a good sign. And I've talked with Karen and others in particular around lead indicators in Gen Ed Math and Gen Ed English and Intro Poli-Sci 1101 and a couple of those other first year courses that really lean into seeing that growth in undergrad. There is a natural tension, especially coming out of COVID, around modality. And I know that was one of the concerns that we'll address in a moment when we get to the specifics of the letter discussion. But the process, we're trying to move students back on campus whenever possible, face to face. And we will advise and we will drive towards that. But there are some students that is not what they're interested in. And we've got to encourage that and show the benefit of, as the president just mentioned, because you can take an online class and perhaps even do it cheaper as a transient student or otherwise. I think we have a strong story to tell and the value that our faculty bring to their distinctive experiences that you're creating in the classroom and leaning into that. So advising has done a great job. We reclaimed and shifted a number of students that had signed up for online classes and encouraged them into face-to-face in this fall semester. We will continue to do that in spring. But I ask that you as faculty, when you're assigned to individual courses and you're seeing those wait lists grow, or you're seeing lack of enrollment, that you reach out to your chairs, and the chairs and the deans will be monitoring this, and we will flex offerings to meet that demand. The goal, though, being to bring students to campus and experience everything that we have to offer. I think the deans have been given a charge in the past month around looking at DFW migrates and looking at particular courses that might be problematic issues. And let me be very clear, this is not a, trying to find someone who's not doing their job or saying, this person's not living up to expectations. That's not the intent. I think we all recognize that courses themselves and situations can often be a limitation for student success. In some courses, this is as high as 60% DFWI, and we need to address that. That's part of continuous improvement. So just be aware of that process, and we're really looking forward to the expertise of the faculty to say, and advising does a good job of this, to say, taking this class alongside this class. We had this on campus yesterday, and I think the phrase was toxic combinations. That was a new one for me. I don't know if you all have heard this, but we know that if you take 2 or 3 of these classes all at the same time, that's a heavy lift. And so advising students away from that, looking at program maps and saying, are we encouraging students, or is the design of our program such that they often are cornered into taking classes that would be this toxic combo? Maybe there needs to be a TM around that. That sounds like an Avengers character, right? Preview day tomorrow. So want to thank you all for all the planning that goes into that. That is a tremendous way of meeting prospective students, showing them campus, talking about academic programs, and then rolling that into. So SEM has got some great events there, and appreciate all the work that you all do, specifically around faculty who can best tell and recruit about their programs. UCM has a role to play in that, but I know for me and for my children and for probably most of us, it was that connection that you made and said, yes, this is the place for me. This is the program for me. And I know that tomorrow we're going to get a lot of those students that experience the great place that UWG is, and then be here in potentially January, but more likely in August next year. I know we've got questions in the future as we address the next. I know we're standing between UPC and GPC, but any questions on any of those topics that I can address? Okay, thank you. Bill, back to you.
Right, so I haven't heard anything from committee chairs that we need to convey right now that's not on the agenda. If there is anything and anything that I need to convey, we can defer that to the end of the agenda where we have the announcement section. So at this time, I want to go ahead and call UPC up and convene, so let's approve her.
Yes, UPC submitted 16 items for Senate approval. We received no questions so far. All right, so we'll take that as a signal that we're ready to vote on that, unless anyone calls that. All right, so all in favor of UPC slated 16 proposals, will you please raise your hand? Okay, and any opposed? Or any abstaining? Okay, great, thank you.
Okay, we can go ahead and move on to the GPC items. Let's go ahead and call the picture.
Right, I didn't receive any questions regarding the GPC items. GPC has submitted 8 items for approval. Are there any questions? Now we'll take a vote. All in favor of the approval of these 8 items? Any opposed? Abstaining?
Okay, we don't have any old business. We'll go ahead and move to the new business. And at this time, what I want to do is offer the provost an opportunity to introduce any prepared remarks that he may have. At the conclusion of that, I have a contextual statement that I will go through to set up our conversation, and we'll proceed from there. I do want to state at the front end that although we have all heard of a letter, some of you have seen a letter out there about front of the provost right now. Today's not about that letter. So
Thank you, Bill. First, I'd like to start by saying I appreciate the opportunity to talk about this and people's concerns. When I went through actually it was a USG professional development course on conflict management and leadership. It's an intriguing statement that was made that says that the opposite of love isn't hate, it's apathy. And it taught me, kind of deep in my understanding, that when we have disagreement, we have questions about something, that's actually a grand thing because it means that we all care about the same thing. So I'm glad that we can address these concerns, and I know we've got some survey results that I'm looking forward to processing as well. I'd like to use this time to address some of the issues that have been raised to the president and to the faculty senate chair, and perhaps clarify, but also to offer an opportunity for anyone who's got a concern to please reach out to me. I'm very happy to have one-on-one conversations, or please connect with Ombuds office or legal or hotlines or the interim president about concerns if you'd like to do it that way as well. Deeply committed and passionate about University of West Georgia. I say it often that my family has been in this region for quite a while, and although I've only been in the position for 4 years, we've been in this area for over 2 decades, and within the university system of Georgia for over 30 years. So I'm very well versed in policy, and the thematic elements that have been raised are really focused around policy, hiring, finance, personnel, some innovations issues. And so I'd like to address that broadly and clarify some things that I've said in the past, but still need to be processed perhaps. I do want to say that in my time here, we've had some discussions around some issues of, I think the BOR policy is 8274 around faculty leave. And every time we talk about this policy, I want to say I really don't like the idea of, or the word leave, because that's not what faculty are doing. And there's still some misunderstanding, or perhaps people perceive that there's not an investment in faculty. And I'd like to address that specifically to say that I benefited from a modified workload, flexibility, and allowing to teach fewer classes and perhaps dive deeper into the scholarship. And I think in the last 4 years, when I started, there were a stack of these leave requests that I received on day one. I consulted with colleagues at other institutions, and the history of, I've been here 6 years and now it's my turn is not common. So wanting to honor the unique needs of faculty and the ability to give them that flexibility to improve their scholarship is absolutely core, and I hold that very sacred. But we need to do it in a way that doesn't fall prey to public perception that faculty have it easy or they're not working, because that unfortunately is a very public criticism. So what I have talked about with the deans and have said in Faculty Senate is this idea that we really need to focus on modified workloads, that there's absolutely the possibility, instead of doing a 4-4 like the faculty handbook says, let's lean into and maybe do a 3-3 or a 3-0 and allow people to do some really important work. I've had those conversations with deans, and if faculty don't feel like that's still supported, I hope that you'll talk with your chair and your dean and to me, and let's find a way to look at the merit of your proposal and the work that you would be doing and find a way to accommodate that. Backfilling with LTI, backfilling with part-time, or looking at courses that we can do a shift in workload. So that's just a regular expectation and an investment that I believe faculty should have. And if there's any question about that, please definitely reach out to me. Also want to talk about the process of how we do hiring. I'm really appreciative of OHR and the work that Terry and her team do in looking at EEOC and looking at the diversity of pools that we have for any position on campus. We've done some good process improvements to make sure that OHR is front and center in that, in doing training prior to any search that's launched. And if there are any concerns about a search along the way, that can be addressed through legal, through OHR, and also with the USG. And we've had some of those come up, people questioning things, and we will work through, and I'm happy to say that if you look at the hiring that we have done,
the outcomes and the excellence of new faculty, new administrators that we've hired, I would say is second to none. And it's worthy of UWG and its value. From an innovations perspective, and I've said this to deans and in other forums, if we're trying 10 things and succeeding on 10 things, that's, we need to push harder, we need to push bigger. And so it's reasonable that in an academic program or across the institution, that we're not necessarily going to hit a home run every time we're at bat. And that's okay. I want everyone in the room to know that I appreciate when we try and move things forward. We might not always succeed, but I'll say we succeed in saying we now know what we're not supposed to do, right? The canonical example of Edison and 1,000 times that didn't work for the light bulb. So let's not stop trying. And I point that out because there have been some things that academic affairs and UWG has tried to do that did not work out well. 10 fingers pointing back on trying to grow some international enrollment and looking at different ways of recruiting. That had been successful elsewhere, but it was not here. And fortunately, that investment was fairly minimal because the recruiters were, the work that they were doing was on a contingency basis and a percentage of that tuition revenue. We are, pivoting and going in a different direction. That didn't work. We move on. I would love to see virtual reality and some other tech take off. President and I just spoke earlier today about some possibilities. Apple's foray into this space with the Apple Vision Pro earlier this week is an indication that that space is maturing. Our VR investments that we've made, some have been successful, some are not. And again, we pivot. So that space is now in the purview of student affairs and available to faculty. So the College of Ed has some VR equipment. Student affairs has some VR equipment. If you're interested in that or other ideas within your own labs, I encourage you to check that out and physically check out those devices as well. Those are available to you. But along the lines of some things not working out and just trying, as I mentioned in my opening comments, the modality is a tricky issue. Offering classes in Douglasville, offering classes in Noonan, that's not easy to figure out what that market demand is. And it's ever changing, especially post-COVID, what students want. I think that enrollment management and recruitment have done a phenomenal job partnering with academic affairs around the Go West Early or growing dual enrollment, not at the expense of programs, but to enhance that pipeline. And in the same way that when we have students come tomorrow at Preview Day and get a taste of West Georgia, then they're more likely to come here. For our dual enrollment students, one of the challenges of that is that if you have transportation and means to get here, that's available to you. But the Go West Early and the busing that we're doing with school districts has not only grown those programs, it's expanded the access that students have, regardless of whether they have a car or not. That does put strain on timing and when and where we're offering classes, but it is a significant pipeline for first-time, full-time on-campus students at the undergraduate level that we're driving for. And that's that tough market segment that everyone across the academy talks about, that demographic cliff. This is a new way that we can grab those students and have them come to West Georgia. We have a phenomenal conversion rate with dual enrollment exceeding 30%. And our efforts there are a way of trying to get more undergraduate students through that conversion. But it does pose challenges of when and where we're offering classes. And if you've got input on that, let's talk through that with faculty, chairs, and deans. I'm very open to that. The diversity of our class offerings. I know that Faculty Senate has taken up the calendar. We had a working group that was addressing when we were offering classes, Monday, Wednesday, Tuesday, Thursday, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. I don't think any student wants the after 3 o'clock on Friday. So we've heard that. We've taken that feedback. Some great questions and comments a year ago in Faculty Senate were raised, and we've revised that, presented that again for consideration, and hoping to launch that in fall of 25. But even that change is not easy. And questions about dining services and other facilities use have come up, working with facilities and dining to say, what's this impact going to be? So I appreciate that back and forth. And I think we've got a better proposal as a result of that. Speaking of, this is a particular project that we dove into, and the faculty executive assistant position that was created. And I'd like to clarify the role of Jeff Reber on that was one that I saw successful in other places as a way of enhancing and increasing faculty voice, not displacing the role of faculty senate, but augmenting it in very particular projects. And so if you've got questions about that role of the FEA, Jeff's done a grand job in championing the faculty voice and raising concerns and issues on your behalf throughout these processes. And that role I've seen be successful elsewhere. I think it's a great way for continuity of faculty input and encourage us to continue to have conversation around that if there are questions about it. Had a great conversation with the Faculty Senate Budget Committee late last month. Unfortunately, some schedule conflicts prevented us from meeting earlier in the month of October, but I'm happy to join any Faculty Senate subcommittee. If you'd like for me to attend, I'm happy to do so. And I know, Dylan, you've really asked the chairs of these committees to reach out to people across campus and dive into the work that you all are doing. So I echo that offer and welcome sitting down and talking about particular concerns or issues that you all have. And then from a question of vitality of academic programs, we've got some challenges in enrollment in particular areas. The university system has established metrics for every academic program to meet with respect to enrollment and number of graduates in those programs. 10 at the undergraduate level, 5 at the graduate, master's, and then 3 per year on a rolling 3-year average for doctoral programs. I know that some of our programs have had challenges in those or are trending down. Some are trending up, which is fantastic. I'm representing that to the system office and championing UWG to have some time to revise these. Hopefully it's not at the expense of others. And so with respect to certificates or graduate or undergraduate degrees, I welcome the conversation of how can we make these vital? How can we make them grow? Rather than just seeing a metric on a spreadsheet and then saying we're closing a program and teaching it out, what can we do to modify it, to meet newer needs, or to advertise them in a different way? So please reach out. I'm charging the deans to have those conversations. But if you want me in those rooms, I'm happy to do that with you. So in conclusion, and happy to take questions and dive into anything that you all have. I want to say that this is a never-ending work of continuous improvement, that these challenges in higher education broadly, enrollment declines that we have witnessed, and fiscal cuts that we've had to make are not easy. But I am committed to working with you all and happy to hear from anyone that's got concern, misunderstanding. I'll communicate differently, deeper, provide more information as you all ask. I offer that broadly and to anyone. I share my cell phone liberally, and so I'll provide it for the minutes. Maybe that'll get scraped off of the Faculty Senate website, or we can put it up privately. Please feel free to text, call, email anytime, or stop by. Happy to meet with anyone anytime. Bill?
All right, thank you. And I hope in a few minutes, hopefully you can answer some questions. But I do think it's important to provide some context for a couple of minutes. And then I also want to at a very high level, share the results of the survey that so many of you contributed to. So if I could begin by contextualizing this with some institutional memory. Many of you will recall a campus-wide survey that we all used to annually complete called Engage West. The entire campus engaged in collective constructive critique. This annual process started with a comprehensive and confidential survey with nearly 100 questions on it. The questions included evaluations of every link in our administrative hierarchies for faculty, our chair, our dean, our provost, and our president. This was a critical component that balanced the separate various performance evaluations that we all routinely undergo as subordinates. That wasn't all. Engage West sought to assess our level of collective engagement with UWG's mission and goals, along with tracking critical elements that determine that engagement, such as work-life balance, pay and benefit satisfaction, communication, and the overall institutional climate. Leaders at all levels were required to publicly share, review, and discuss the results from their units, and then address how we can improve. I understood Engage West as reflective of an underlying culture. We had a culture that robustly allowed, and in fact, by design, encouraged constructive criticism to flow up and down the administrative hierarchy. We talked with one another, not to one another. We engaged. Unfortunately, we've lost a lot of this culture. However, I believe the foundation is still there. I believe we can rebuild it, and I believe we can re-engage, and I believe we can start that process today. I'm sure many of you would agree that reinstituting a systematic tool like Engage West would be welcome. It's in that spirit and tradition that we're proceeding today. So we've gathered feedback, and Dr. Preston, I hope will be able to address some of it that I'll share. And to be clear, today's not about responding to an anonymous letter. We're past that. We have information we can use to move beyond that. We do need to move beyond, but to move forward, it's important to understand where we are. So I want to very briefly summarize the results of the Qualtrics survey. At least 63 people directly contributed to the Qualtrics survey. That's about 15% of our full-time faculty. Many explicitly indicate that they were conveying the thoughts on behalf of broader units. It's also clear that units from all across campus are represented in the survey results. These results can't be easily dismissed as unrepresentative of our faculty. In total, we received 53 single-space pages worth of comments, totaling over 25,000 words. In general, the responses are clearly well-intentioned and insightful. So to review, question 1, what's the provost office doing well? There were 52 responses to this question. It comprised 6 out of the 53 pages. Some of these specify their praises for the support staff in the office. Many of these answers are actually not in fact positive. And I want to note personally at this moment that I received feedback that I should have used more precise language in these questions. By writing provost's office, I meant to create an opening for feedback regarding other administrative leaders that report to the provost. In hindsight, I agree. I should have used more precise language in those questions, so I want to take ownership for that. For question 2, what was the provost office? What can the provost office improve? There were 63 responses to this question, 35 of 53 total pages. For the overwhelming majority of these, it's clear that the criticism is not for the provost. It is for the provost and not the support staff. Question 3, is there anything else you'd like to convey? There were 49 responses, 13 pages out of the 53. These were generally critical comments. And so the responses paint a dark picture that broadly substantiates the general sentiment that was expressed in the letter that many of us read. Very few responses were sympathetic to the provost. Several interrelated themes emerged. I want to convey those to contextualize our conversation. There is a sense, this is the most significant thing. There is a sense that the provost is not trusted and is out of touch with the faculty. He doesn't meaningfully engage with regular faculty or shared governance. His communication, decision-making methods are deeply problematic, counterproductive, and lack of transparency. That he has over-relied on centralization. That he's not acknowledged pervasive faculty morale issues. There are serious concerns about administrative hiring and personnel decisions. That a fear of retaliation for speaking up has been ingrained in our faculty culture. So I hope the bulk of today's questions can come from the floor, and I hope to mostly moderate and facilitate, but I do feel a sense to lead. So I want to break the ice and start with one question. And I hope today's questions can be at a high level and be thematic. We simply don't have the time to be overly specific. So I want to start with a question that I think addresses the most significant theme that has been conveyed throughout this process. Dr. Preston, the most significant theme that was conveyed in the survey was that there is a lack of trust. What can you do to help instill a sense of trust in leadership?
Sure. Thank you for the summary and for the question. I'll start by saying I haven't had the opportunity to read these yet, and I will be reading every single word. What'd you say, 25,000 words? So that's my homework for the weekend. But with regard to trust, I'm trying to convey that I'm open to speaking with anyone. The idea of retaliation is not one that I believe in, and I think it's appropriate during Ethics Week that is clearly encoded in the USG policy and the state policy towards ethics. So I hope that if you have concern or you have a question about some decision that's being made, within my ability to do so, because some conversations are HR related or with Interim President Ashwani Manga, I may not be at liberty to go into the details of all of them, but in my ability, as much as I'm able to, happy to answer any question and dive deep into any concern that anyone has.
There's one more question that was consistently raised that I think it's useful for me to bring up collectively before we open it to the floor. You actually just touched on it yourself. Unfortunately, the response rate to this survey was quite a bit lower than it would have been. It was consistently conveyed to me by colleagues that there was a fear pervasive amongst us to even respond to this survey, much less a fear to show up to an event like this to voice concerns directly, which is why we did the survey in the first place. I heard from individuals representing entire units conveying that they did not want to contribute to the survey. Many people did. So I'll read very briefly a sampling of these responses. I have serious concerns about retaliation for even completing the survey. I will not attend the Senate meeting to speak openly for this reason. Another one. I'm afraid to say anything negative for fear of retaliation against me personally and against colleagues in my department. There were many responses along these lines, and I've heard similar responses. Dr. Preston, what, if anything, can you do to help ameliorate this clear culture of fear that we have gripping our faculty?
Yeah, I think that's similar to the first question. And I would offer there are anonymous and confidential ways that people can express their concerns. USG hotline, the Office of the Ombuds, go directly to Ashwani's office. And I think if I heard properly, he said he's open to that. That addresses hopefully the confidential and the anonymous concerns that people might have. That I'll also share. I am genuinely interested in hearing from people, and I believe strongly in policy and process. Again, pointing to ethics, and I'm pointing over here to Christy because I know that she works very hard to make sure everyone is aware of this. The state has an anti-retaliatory process. So I hope that everyone feels confident that even if we disagree, raise the concern, let's have the discussion. And if there were any kind of inappropriate reprisal, that's absolutely inappropriate. I would never do that myself. And I assure you that across academic affairs, if anyone does that, then we will follow state and USG policy.
So I have more thematic questions based on the survey that I can share, but at this time I want to go ahead and offer the floor to anyone who would like to contribute. Raise your hand. Please.
Yes, I appreciate and I thank you for the words saying, please contact me. But trust is earned. And I didn't hear the word earn. And I'm not saying that you're not earning it or doing it, but I think if words matter. So if you tell faculty who have expressed an opinion where faculty seems to not trust you, faculty seems to fear, I think say, I'm gonna try my very best. That would be a key word. And I think transparency. So we ought to put a mechanism in place where things are transparent. Because although you're being very generous and saying, please reach out to me at any time, that might be an issue. I'm afraid of reaching out to you. I would rather be, surrounded by other witnesses. Do you follow what I'm saying? And I'm not
Yes.
in any way accusing you or saying of misspeaking or saying false things. That's not the point. But it can be perceived that way as, no, I'm not gonna reach out to him. There's no way in hell I'm gonna do something like that. I'm afraid. So we should put a mechanism in place where people can feel safe in numbers. And transparency in your decisions and why you're suggesting this, why you're suggesting that this position be created from the top down instead of from the bottom up. Because look, these are the facts. The facts are, it's worked really well in other institutions, et cetera, and have a conversation. And I'm using that just as an example, no? So that would be my suggestion. Let's have an open, transparent conversation, not just one day, but put a mechanism in place where people can feel confident to not just reach out to you personally, and we thank you for that offer, but also feel that we can say what we think and in an open way, like we used to with Engage West. I remember that they were so concerned in Engage West to get information and feedback from everybody that they asked the department, we were the Department of Foreign Languages then, could some of you please serve as interpreters? So that everybody, even the housekeeping people, everybody could express their opinion. That's how open and transparent Engage West was. We should probably come back to something similar to that. That would be my suggestion.
Thank you. And I will work harder to earn that trust. So I hear you, and I am open to that, absolutely. The second hour of Faculty Senate is a good way in our conversations here. So I think we can do it in Faculty Senate. If you would like for me to come and speak in a department and hear from faculty and staff in departments, very open to that as well. And if that group environment is better than one-on-one and people feel that that's more appropriate, happy to do that with you.
Is there another question from the floor or should I? Yes, sir.
Dr. Preston, so my question for you is thinking about one of the things that I feel like has happened over the last few years is that we've got much more hierarchical and people feel that they can't communicate up the chain without going through strict structures. Like one of the good things that happened in my department was when I asked Karen to invite you to come to speak to DCEPS last year. And I think that was a good conversation that we had with you. And I think that helped the faculty understand where you stood and it helped you understand where we come from. And I think that what maybe my suggestion to you would be, instead of waiting for us to invite you, maybe reach out to departments and chairs and go ahead and start visiting departments so that you can build that relationship. Right?
It's a great suggestion. I'm going to take that as homework in addition to the reading. And if I'm correct, I think there were some great suggestions from faculty that came out of that discussion that really have led to the growth of, in particular, political science and soon to be crim out of that DCEPS meeting. So, well said. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. President. Yvonne was talking about Engage West and that worked. It really felt that faculty felt, it's great we got this opportunity to discuss in a constructive way, which is just not helpful. In a constructive way about how we felt about people that were above in the chain, rock and roll, in the chain of command. But that just went without consultation. And it's may not be you, probably wasn't you, that's where it gone. Line of communication gone, and now suddenly we have this culture of concern again, whether or not it was retaliation. I did not in every single conversation. That went, and then we have these instances of something, people thinking something was right. We can get rid of this by just reinstituting engagements, is my suggestion.
So I'm hearing a theme.
Yeah.
And I'll take that back to the EAC. You are correct. That was not the call of the provost in academic affairs. That transcended academic affairs. But I will take that as a point, and we'll discuss that at the president's camp. Yes, sir.
So, Dr. Weston, College of Education faculty have expressed concerns about low faculty and staff morale in the COE and the university as a whole. But all the issues seem to boil down to lack of transparency concerning financial decision-making and approval of faculty bonds. Let me share with you two examples. A program and a college level example that specifically speak to the faculty language. At our reading literacy program meeting this morning, we calculated that only 37% of read courses will be taught by full-time faculty during the upcoming spring 2025 semester. And this decreases to 28% when we include Georgia State's. From fall of 17 to fall of 23, student enrollment increased by 2,500 students. Yet our faculty numbers are lower than in recent memory. COE faculty lines are not being approved or refilled at a rate that reflects the increase in student enrollment. Could you explain this trend and outline any plans to address faculty shortages moving forward?
Yeah, thank you. Those statistics are overwhelming, and I completely agree with them. College of Ed, in particular in the growth in grad, has been tremendous. And it is a pressure point, one that I have addressed with leadership in backfilling positions, running searches that have not been successful for various reasons. I am absolutely committed to filling those lines and resourcing College of Ed and other programs that are growing. And COE is probably the most acute, given the size and scope of that growth. The budget process and the advocacy from academic affairs has been significant. And I recognize that the part-time, if we look at part-time teaching by section for the last, I think, 4 or 5 years, it has been fairly even, maybe plus or minus 1% across the entire institution by program, college and school, except in College of Education. And yes, the Georgia Best model of partnering with districts by design has an increase in those part-time. As you correctly point out, the halo effect or other growth across ed has outpaced that Georgia Best, and resources absolutely need to go into that college. So that is an ongoing struggle and one that I'm committed to working on. I wish I had a silver bullet. I mean, Halloween was last week, but we can still talk about silver bullets this week. It is the thing that keeps me up, it wakes me up, and absolutely needs to be addressed. And for my part, doing everything we can to resource that growth. And we'll continue to do so. But I'd like to offer to follow up on that specifically. Departmental or college discussion, let's make that happen. And we can review what has been, what's currently doing, and then what we're going to do in the future. At some point, that growth will, and I don't want to be predict negative things, but the reality of it is that based on that growth, if we don't invest in that area, there will be challenges and consequences to that. And I don't believe that faculty and classes should bear that. Yes.
Parent design and geology. I don't expect change to come from this comment, but I think it's a unique perspective. I've had great results emailing you directly, getting communication, asking for very specific requests for my program. So I think there is a strong, strong sense of we will communicate with faculty. But on that scale, I think the current management structure that we're all struggling with is unsustainable because there are programs that communicate directly to chairs who no longer have direct content expertise. Then they have general and peripheral connections to those programs, but they're not expert, not subject area experts. So it makes it really difficult for them to be recruitment advocates, any type of advocate. And it's also really hard to find people who are willing to serve in those positions because it's such tremendous service role. And it exhausts faculty because many of those people have been growing for years and they don't want to go to the other side. They can't possibly fathom being a chair. Then there's the link to the dean, which is even more diluted from faculty because nobody wants to be dean anymore. It's an impossible task. It's managing these massive schools. And so the communication from the program to the chair to the dean to the provost is not a strong link. It's not anything, I don't think, directly related to you. It is the system, and it will continue to be unsustainable if there aren't changes.
I'm going to couple that back to proactively meeting with departments. Appreciate the concern. And I think another thing that we can do better is also, I'm coming from a place where the chairs and deans meetings historically at previous institutions, the provost was not in for those conversations because it was perhaps redundant, right? Have a meeting with the deans, communicate, and then that's repeated more locally. But what I'm sensing from input is that more direct communication is necessary. And my offer is to not only meet with the departments, but also attend provost council, which is an interesting name if the provost isn't in the room, right? But I see that as the chairs and deans meeting and will recuse and step away. My view is that those conversations could be had and maybe there's a different tone if I'm not in the room. But if there's an interest for me to be there and to clarify and to communicate more directly, happy to do so. And we're scheduled to be at the next provost council week from Monday.
So I have a question prepared that is very much on this line, so I just want to briefly continue to clarify this conversation. So many comments on the survey and by other means conveyed to me that leadership of the academic affairs generally, so this is not strictly a provost thing, should rely more on written communication and encourage a wider seeing of email to help foster a two-way dialogue and rely less on hierarchical conveyance of information. It sounds like this is something you'd be willing to embrace and change along these lines.
Yeah, let's have that conversation. I know that proliferation of email, our students don't even read email, I'm told. I can't fathom that because I was around when this was invented. And I think it's a great means of communication and for documenting things, but I also know that we get flooded. And I'm sure everyone in this room probably gets hundreds of things a day. It's good for filtering. But if we'd like to do more written communication, my only ask is that we find out a way where that's going to be successful in people receiving it. Because just putting things out isn't sufficient. And I still remember my undergrad comms course where, I'm still using some of those techniques. So it's all at comms faculty, kudos, it sticks, right? But let's talk about what's the most meaningful way for people to receive important updates and establish that. I'm reminded that the AA newsletter was completely reinvented 4 years ago when I got here because we were trying to streamline rather than individual emails going out when anybody had an individual announcement. It was weekly on Monday. And so that was a means of simplifying and not flooding people's inboxes. We can revisit that. We can also look at after a dean's meeting, summary, after provost council, summary. I'm absolutely open to that. And I'll share that, lack of an email is not for me, trying to obfuscate and hide. I just know that we have a tremendous amount of content coming at us. And, if we look at my emergenetics profile, I believe that if we're talking at a higher level, that's getting filtered down, if that's not happening, or it's not being received, maybe it's being communicated, not being received. Or maybe it's the game of telephone where it changes, right? Started here and then it's different when it gets to the other side of the room. Then happy to look into how we can do that better.
I know Dr. Longa has to leave soon, but that doesn't necessarily mean we have to stop, but I just wanted to create a space if you do have to. Okay.
Yeah, no, I just want to say first thanks to our Provost Preston for coming up. Like I said, he was, when this came up himself volunteered to, he said, I'm happy to go in front of the Senate and talk about these things. So I do appreciate that. Thank you for all your great comments. I'll definitely have a discussion to see. I think it's important for us to hear from you on, and some things can be perceptions, sometimes rooted in reality, sometimes they can be perceptions because of misunderstanding, miscommunication, and so on. But regardless, if there are negative perceptions on transparency and trust, we'll definitely work together to make sure that we are better on that moving forward. So that, as someone said, we can earn your trust, those things. I would also say that these are, I've been, like you all, both of us have been in professor positions. I've been in faculty senates. And I've been on that side and challenged administrators. And then having been an administrator myself, especially and I've been a provost too, these are incredibly hard jobs. I do want you to appreciate that these are impossible jobs because of all the pressures you have from different directions. Like when you're a provost in the University System of Georgia, I'm the chief academic officer of the system. I'm making so many phone calls every week to someone like John and saying, hey, this is the policy, what has happened on this? Why don't we have a follow-up? There is pressure from this side, from me, there is pressure from chancellor to the president, there are board members, there are other stakeholders. There is a lot going on. So, and not all of that can be shared by where the provost says, yeah, Ashwani just called me and this is what he said. So, there are things which are confidential or you're trying to respect the other things going around. I'm just giving you that context again, because, I'm here for a few months. I have worked with John in the past. I've worked with him here. I've worked with other people. I'm just saying that as kind of having some appreciation for how complex these jobs are, and sometimes it is really hard to, to talk about everything that's going on in the background, right? So just wanted to give you that context from my vantage point. A second thing is in terms of, some of it was like, programs and resources and so on. We are at the University of West Georgia. We're in like I mentioned the challenges, but we also have a great opportunity. When you're trying to be like, you're trying to move up as we're trying to do, and it's not just D1 athletics, it's kind of in all levels, I keep saying D1 everything. There is always going to be a push and pull. I can tell you in any, I saw some comments of the staff members. Okay, we have so many administrators here. We don't. You can look at any peer institution, compare any unit. This is not an overstaffed institution. Look at, you can look at our comprehensive institutions, do any comparisons. And so, yes, the whole operations of universities has become more complex. Take one example, 20 years ago, advancement in state universities wasn't a thing because you would get funded through public budgets. You didn't need to raise money. You didn't need to rely on philanthropy. But over time, as state budgets have diminished, you need to raise funds through other means. So you have people in advancement. And these people are great because every person, if you get one person, you can get 4 times, 5 times, 6 times that philanthropy money coming back in. But now you need advancement teams. You look at so many federal regulations and so on. So it has become a much more complex system for universities in general. But I can tell you the University of West Georgia is not the case that we have, like, because I hadn't, from the system office, I had some sense. Now I have a better sense of the kind of units we have. Anything, you can pick any unit, compare it to other institutions. It's easy to do. Go to the website, look at our athletics, for example, then look at athletics at other schools, comparable schools. You will see the number of people we have. Look at communication, look at advancement, look at legal, HR, anything. And that's easy to do. You don't need any data, just look at websites and you'll see what we have. So That's not to say that, we can't find the right balance. I'm just giving you, this is a perspective of more of an outsider coming in for a few months who go back to the system office. I'm not talking about a specific individual or anything. I'm just trying to tell you that these are very complex jobs. We have big challenges, not only from I've talked about AI briefly in this room. Our challenge is not only other institutions, our challenge is big technology firms and so on. When I talk about in-person experiences, one big reason is because I'm really worried for the entire university system of Georgia, for entire higher ed, that everything that can be digitized will be taken away from higher ed. That's a huge challenge for us, because that'll become like a commodity. Anyone who can deliver online education cheap will sweep the market, and it's more likely to be a non-higher ed institution rather than a higher ed institution. It's more likely to be a Google or a Facebook or someone like that. It's going to be like an Amazon versus a Barnes and Noble, and will be the Barnes and Noble, right? So that to me is the challenge. That's why I keep talking about in-person experiences, which cannot be easily replicated, because you can't replicate this campus, the people, the student-led groups, the athletics. All of that combination is something which a Google cannot replicate. And that's what we need. And so as we look at, we are, like I said, we'll work on all the issues that are coming our way. But I would also say, think about when you talk to your colleagues, talk about these things, right? You're the faculty senate, you're the leaders of this group. Talk to the others, because this is an existential issue for us. If we can't have faculty who teach in our classes in person, if we can't have environments in which we have student groups and others here, it'll be very hard to survive this environment. And we are, that's why I give you the numbers of where we are on undergrad in person. And again, things are better. We're doing things administratively, but none of this will work if the faculty members together don't move in that direction. Because there's only so much you can do administratively. We can just keep looking at the data and telling you, hey, this is where we are. But the real difference will be if students see that with faculty members. So I would ask you that as you give us feedback on, all of us, on what's not working well, also give us feedback on what can be done for this issue that I'm trying to raise here. Because I do think that, again, we're fine now. I'm not saying that we're in big trouble or anything right now, but it is a challenge that the University of West Georgia will have to address very quickly. So just wanted to say some brief remarks, but again, I do really appreciate the detailed feedback, and we'll certainly have more conversations. All right. Thank you.
If you're willing, I want to open the floor back up. We have a little bit of time left in this meeting to continue the conversation. Yes.
I do want to thank you for being here, and I think you've heard from everybody here. We do appreciate how complex your jobs are, and we appreciate all you do. But when talking to other faculty, the disconnect is it doesn't feel like you seem to see how complex our jobs are. And you're counting on us to create this experience for students when we are feeling not supported and not appreciated, not listening or heard. So that would be my comment that I picked up on in talking with other faculty.
Yeah, and you beat me to the punch, right? I appreciate Ashwani's comment that administrative positions are difficult and complex, but the work that faculty are doing is very different than it was years ago. And the challenges that students are facing and the things that they bring into the classroom is very different than it has been. So I'm glad that you raised that. I completely agree with you. And the asks and the how do we showcase our programs? How do we recruit? How do we invest in and support our students in different ways, and perhaps in deeper ways than we ever have been called to do, is absolutely true. So that work-life balance that's been part of the Engage West, and some comments that I've heard. I mean, even don't email me over the weekend, right? So I apologize if I'm emailing you over the weekend. Please ignore it until you're back on campus and working. But if you're feeling that pressure, and that's some of the deans are smiling, saying, yeah. And I say the same thing, right? When you're on holiday, when you're on break. But let's find ways, if you're feeling that pressure, and I'm not questioning it, it is absolutely very real, then how can we make sure people are supported and invested and have the resources needed? So appreciate you raising that.
Yeah, I just want to, on behalf of faculty over many years, contextualize a little further than Dylan did by mentioning that if I were to give a diagnosis to our faculty, we suffer from complex PTSD. And that means we've experienced multiple traumas, beginning, I would say, at least with the non-renewals that happened in 2019. And the reason why I think a lot of these themes are being mentioned, like retaliation, transparency, and trust, is because when you're wounded, it's really hard to undo that without some help. And we have had the non-renewals, COVID, which affected a broader group than just us, of course, all the change in modality that we did from, overnight in March. And then, of course, the reorganizations of several colleges. And in each of these cases, we had no real control. I mean, we were essentially just helpless to the circumstances. And so this already, because I've agreed to be Senate chair and I'm working in my current position because of this, that faculty want to be included, feel that we deserve and need to be included, especially in things that have significance for us, including non-renewing our faculty, which I know wasn't you or you, it was long before you, but because we've, I think, experienced ourselves as being so disempowered on multiple occasions about decisions that have massive impact and where we have expertise. We have expertise that could have made a big difference. And I think we see retaliation having happened in some of those cases. I'm just wanting to demonstrate to you that the faculty come to this not like just any other faculty. And just like if you have a student who has a disability, I'm not accusing us of having a disability, but if you have a student who has accessibility needs or disability issues, you can ignore it, or you can really be sensitive to it and try to work with it. So in response to something like concerns with retaliation, saying we have a university system, policy about that, that's great, but we're coming at it with a lot of hurt and fear and prior wounds that we need to heal in order for that policy to even be believed in by us. So I just want to echo, this is not just Jeff speaking, this is what I've heard over many years from faculty. I just want to echo that and make sure that is understood. The context is not just one of faculty who are all sort of equivalently unaffected by the past. We have a history, and it's one that has to be, I think, considered as we go forward.
Yeah, I appreciate you raising that and revisiting the issue of earned trust. And when I point to the policy of non-retaliation, that doesn't mean I'm hiding behind that or I'm being flippant about the response. To me, that is an absolute. And when I point to that as my first in how do we go forward, I think without that, then how can you be assured that there won't be? And I hope that we can demonstrate that based on past decisions going forward, earning that and really leaning in. It's not lost, and I think this is maybe the third time I've said it. It's not lost on me that this is Ethics Week, and I can't say enough how deeply I believe in that. To make it personal, I had an older sibling who always took the shortcut and always got caught. So I learned from their example, and so I'm very and I say this, putting this out there, being very vulnerable and personal with you. I deeply believe in process and doing the right thing every time. If that's not perceived, I own that. Let's earn that. And I seriously ask you to come and talk with me at any time, or go to another source that, if that's your choice.
Can I, oh, I'm sorry.
Well, I think we have Patrick first.
Okay, I think one of the more important threads from Jeff's comment, though, may be the issue of faculty expertise. I think there's a pervasive sense that faculty expertise is not heard or consulted or taken into consideration, or really actually serving as a foundation for decision-making, whether it's creation of new academic units, where the units themselves are not just about administrative functions, but also about student experience. And I'd like to, as a side note, that to say that I think our students are quite aware that their learning conditions also depend on faculty working conditions. So so expertise to me is an important issue. So I kind of want to really phrase it as a question. Since, like, for example, in my unit, we had 2 reorganizations or restructurings in the last 4 years. So going forward, the need for changes like that arises, but also other decision-making. How do you plan on consulting faculty expertise in a more, not just openness is always good, but also fundamental and systemic or structural way?
So I'll start by saying, you know, these conversations do happen. If they're not, if the right people aren't in the room, then let's revisit that. And let's talk about what were the specifics and how could we have done them differently? And then use that as a springboard for future, I mean, I hope we're not having restructure. And then we've quiesced, because it's been quite a lot in the last 5 years.
Yeah, just talking to deans is not really talking to faculty. I just want to put that out there. In terms of who's in the room.
Yes, and then working with departments and at deans and chairs council and provost council. I think that's a way to get closer to the discussion.
Well, he kind of summed it up. I was going to say, invite in faculty expertise, and going beyond just listening to what they're saying, but acting perhaps on many of their recommendations, which show that you're trusting in what they have to say as well. I would love to know, in terms of the breakdown of trust for the provost, was there lack of trust of the provost in hiring process? Is there a lack of the provost in coming up with resources that we need, in particular human resources, right? That we need. I don't know if the trust category was able to, you know, if you were able to break it down a bit, but it would be interesting to know where we're questioning the trust, because trust, as we know, is so fragile, right? And once it's broken, it's kind of hard to put it back together. And so, but a good start would be inviting faculty expertise and actually taking steps towards implementing some of their recommendations, right? It's not enough to just say, oh, checkbox, we have 10 faculty on there, but none of their recommendations were even, you know, addressed. So, yeah, it's just be interesting to know, like, in what areas specifically did we not trust the program, right?
You're actually asking, we haven't read that report.
Oh, okay. Perhaps it's the right?
Yeah, so all of those issues came up.
Oh.
I think I want to respect everybody's time. I absolutely respect Dr. Preston for standing up here and taking these questions. I don't want to go any longer than necessary. But I do also respect that many people are here today who don't necessarily have to be here today. So I want maybe 1 or 2 additional questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have been at West Georgia for 30 years, about 1/4 of that in administrative roles. And so I will give a context in about a minute or 2, and then I have a respectful request. 3 decades ago, when Dr. Geisler became chair of chemistry, we expressed to her our concerns that we had no idea how money was spent. And so it was the old days where she brought an overhead projector, had a transparency, and said, we have X dollars, and this is all the money I have. All of you decide how different lab-based courses are going to have their budget allocations. And I found that to be an excellent example of transparency which I tried to emulate when I chaired 2 departments and briefly was the dean of the College of Science and Mathematics. Now, Chairman Jeff just mentioned PTSD. He is an expert on that subject, but I will point out that he did bring up restructuring of the old 3 colleges, which were combined into 1, which came about with corresponding loss in resources at the department and program level. Dr. Guzon brought up the idea that nobody wants to be a chair anymore. So just to put it in context, we have mega chairs who write 60 evaluations in my unit. And let's think about it. An evaluation a day, including weekends, would take an individual 2 months to do it. So we feel at the grassroots level that each restructuring has come about with a corresponding loss in terms of an operating budget. And I don't mean to brag, but it shocked me when I found out that in chemistry, the operating budget is less than a faculty seat grant that 3 of us got from Watson. And at that point, I told Dr. McPhail, I'm not going to ask you for a dime. I told Dr. Payne, I'm not going to ask you for a dime because you don't have any money. Now my request for you, Provost Preston. It would be nice to know as a faculty member, without having to go to the budget committee or my team, how the discretionary money that is at the provost level is being spent. I'll give you a very specific example. Not in my unit, but in a sister unit, 2 faculty members left in August or January, putting on the table roughly an estimated $200,000, which were not budgeted in your budget, for example. So a natural question came up in many conversations that faculty members had. How did the provost spend those $200,000? I'm not questioning the prerogative of the provost to make budgetary decisions. I'm a former dean. And so I would have asked my faculty members to respect me enough to say that I will spend the money after seeking input, but it's my decision, but I will share it. I make that corresponding request of you. Thank you.
Yes. First, congratulations on the grant, great work. And that's what I was bragging on earlier about WARSP and the good work that faculty are doing. The reorg and the combination of 3 colleges occurred prior to my arrival. I can't speak to the specifics of that. But my understanding is that there was a significant institutional budget cut that had to be met from that. If I'm just leaning into myth, I apologize. Again, I wasn't here for that. But to your specific question about transparency and budget, yes, the Faculty Senate Budget Committee, that charter for that group is to work with advancement and the budget and finance VPs for overall structure. So that group, I'm happy to attend, when I'm invited, but it's not the regular work. I mean, it transcends academic affairs. That said, the allocations and the distributions follow growth and decline. And for the past 4 years in the budget cycle, we have shifted budgets based on demand. Certain vacancies have been filled, certain vacancies have been swept, some within the purview of academic affairs, some not. But when a vacancy comes up and if there's teaching need, then those budgets that, as you're saying, are being liberated should be dedicated to ensuring backfilling and making sure that those courses are covered and those programs are sustained. If the program is overprescribed and a vacancy comes up, we utilize that opportunity to redirect funds into other areas that are growing. But you talk about operating, and I'll share that some of our operating costs have been reduced significantly across academic affairs in the schools and colleges because we're trying to sustain people. And operating budgets would be the first thing that we reduce rather than doing reductions in force, which is the last thing anyone wants to do, of course. Happy to look at that process. How is budget and finance publishing this? What is shared to the deans? How is that conveyed to the chairs? How is that conveyed to faculty? Specific backfilling should not, if a vacancy occurs last minute or someone needs to leave, either to go to a conference or FMLA or other needs. That should not be allocated to other faculty in the department. Those resources should be allocated to make sure the program is whole. So happy to dive into specifics. I know, limitation of time today, but we can revisit that and how is that being communicated?
If we have one brief question on a topic that we haven't addressed yet, and I'll go to Kelly.
So I'm Kelly Dyer from the School of Nursing, and I was thinking about what Jeff said about faculty dwelling in a space of post-traumatic stress. And that made me think from the nursing perspective that when we have someone who has repeated trauma to the same area, they're going to get a 1. And if you think about the things that have just been mentioned in this room today, all the changes, and when we look at stress on someone, even the great things get a really high score. When we give people a stress scale, getting married, which is a joyous thing, has the same stress points as the death of a spouse. So even some of the changes we've experienced have been beneficial and they've been for the good, but it still is change. And it makes me think about being on the open ocean and you're in a boat trying to sail, but you just keep getting slammed by wave after wave after wave. And I think one thing, we as a faculty are exhausted by all the changes that have happened in the last 5 years. Starting pre-COVID, we had a presidential search because Dr. Marrero left us. As an example of the lack of transparency and communication, I found that out because my daughter was a student at Georgia Southern and they announced it on their Facebook page before this faculty was told. And there's been multiple other things that have preceded you. So to a certain extent, you walked into a hot mess. I mean, that's just the truth. But we've had change after change after change, and they just don't stop coming. And, you talked about how complex your role is. And God love you, I don't want your job ever. I don't. I know where my strengths lie, and it is in teaching and service and scholarship. That's the work of the faculty. But the bottom line is the faculty do the work of the university. And when I listen to what's been said here, when I read the letter, when I've had faculty in my department and others talk to me about their concerns, what it sounds like is, number one, repeated traumas over and over and over and over again. No acknowledgement of the effect that has on the faculty. Faculty are feeling like we're not seen. We're feeling like we are not heard. We are a shared governance institution, but I think 53 pages conveys we're not an apathetic faculty. We have not just laid down and rolled over and said, do to us what you will. We are hungry for people to hear us. We are hungry for people to see us, whoever that needs to be. But it feels like rather than in this shared governance institution, instead of decisions being made with us, it's being done to us. Case in point, we didn't know the 2 people who came to interview for the dean position were the finalists. The nursing faculty should have known that. One of those 2 people, in theory, will become our next dean. We should have known before the day they showed up that they were the finalists. There have been decisions made that affected me individually that I asked for a conversation with you about. I got no response for my request to have that conversation with you. So it's affected me personally, but what I hear in this room is we're tired of things being done to us. Do things with us. If we're doing the complex work of the institution and teaching the students, we need the support to do that. I have I think, a 5-hour overload this semester. I get no compensation for that. Other institutions compensate their faculty when they have an overload. If I'm contracted to teach X number of hours a semester, and I'm teaching 5 more than I was contracted for, should I not be compensated for that? Should other faculty? If you look at a faculty and you tell us there's no money in the budget for you to get another faculty member, but you have enough people teaching overload to equal a faculty member, why can't we get that faculty member? I typically work 7 days a week. Monday through Friday, probably 10 to 12 hours a day. On the weekend, probably 4 to 6 hours. Every Saturday, every Sunday, that should be my day of worship and rest. So we need to be seen and we need to be heard, and that means involving us in these big decisions that are going to affect us. Okay, I'll be quiet now.
Thank you. No, keep, like you said, we're not an apathetic faculty. And I think that's phenomenal. So thank you for raising that. If I can address 2 very specific, let's not leave this room until we connect. Maybe it got lost in email or I don't know what happened, but I pride myself on always replying to anything I receive. So I'd like to follow up with you on that. And then with respect to the overload, and I'll say this to all faculty, right? The faculty handbook is 4-4. Ideally, it would be less than that, so you can increase the scholarship. But if you are going above that in contact hours, in credit hours delivered, it is not the institution's policy to overload people without compensation. So I'd like to resolve that, and if that is true for anyone else, then.
Very common in nursing, and I don't even think the compensation was the issue, but then even for service on your evaluation, how the heck are you modified at that point?
Yeah.
That's the definition of service. We gave our time away and somehow we're modified.
Yeah.
That's an insult.
Well said.
All right, thank you. Dr. President, I know this was very, very challenging, so thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you all. I appreciate the input, and I'll repeat where I started. Let's not be apathetic, and I'm glad that you all are raising these. Let's continue the conversation after today. I appreciate your time, your energy, and your passion.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If y'all could bear with me for just one more minute, I have an unrelated note to share that I think is something that you are all interested in, because I've been getting a lot of questions about it. That's the presidential search. So the first thing that I want to very clearly convey to everybody is, in no way, shape, or form do I want to be the only person on that committee getting a paycheck from West Georgia. That is far, far from my ambition. I also want to equally say that I feel the weight of that responsibility more than I can possibly convey in words. I commit to you to take it as seriously as I have taken anything in my life. At this point, what I know is not what I know that I can share. What I know is that we are meeting on Monday for our charge meeting in this building with the chancellor. And I'll give you a little bit of backstory just briefly. When I officially assumed this position and found out that we were losing our president, I reached out to the chancellor's office to convey that faculty need to be front and center in this search. They replied to me eventually and asked me for recommendations for people who would be good to serve on the search committee. I consulted with colleagues and I gave some what I thought were thoughtful recommendations with justification. I did the same for staff. I also recommended staff to be on the search committee, and it's very unfortunate that's not the case. I do want to contextualize. I think it's important to know that there, as Dr. Monga highlighted, there has been a policy change on this front. So if you go to that Wayback Machine, the Internet Archive, a couple of years, you can see that the policy in USG that guides searches is not the same now as it was then. It said at that time that faculty should compose the largest number of institutional members. Now it specifies that there should be, it doesn't give a number, but it lists several categories that should be represented on the committee if they determine to have a committee. Staff is not among those. It doesn't say staff can't be, but staff's not among those. I'll also say for context, that this summer, on June 13th, there were 2 searches in the USG announced, one at Savannah State and one at Albany State. If you go to those press releases and you look at their search committees, they're mirror images of the committee that was announced for us. This is not a situation that I at all wanted, but my commitment to you is to be your advocate. I will do everything I can to get that committee on this campus to hear from us as much as possible, and I commit to use this forum and other forums as appropriate to convey everything I know as I know. Thank you all. Yeah, if you want to hit me after with some questions, I'll hang out. But at this point, I move that we adjourn. Thank you all.
Thanks, Bill. Dylan, nice stuff. Thank you.